On October 15, 2010, a man was found dead inside the lavatory of a speeding train bound for Rome's Termini station. His passport identified him as Mahmoud al-Khaled, a middle-aged businessman from Gaza traveling under an assumed name. To fellow passengers, he had seemed unremarkable, quiet, polite, the kind who kept to himself. He boarded the train in Milan, carrying a slim black briefcase and a paperback novel in Arabic. None suspected that he was already a marked man. When the train rolled into Rome, the conductor noticed the lavatory door locked for too long. Inside, he found the man slumped over the basin, eyes wide open, a faint trace of foam at his lips. The air smelled faintly of almonds. Police arrived within minutes, sealing the carriage, interviewing witnesses, and collecting the few items left behind. There were no signs of struggle, no weapon, no evidence of forced entry. Just a body, a passport, and a single train ticket. It was only when investigators cross-checked the fingerprints that the truth began to unfold. Mahmoud al-Khaled was no ordinary traveler. He was a senior Hamas commander, wanted by multiple intelligence services, and his journey to Rome had been under quiet surveillance for weeks. By nightfall, embassies in Tel Aviv, Cairo, and Brussels were already exchanging encrypted cables. A secret war had moved into the heart of Europe, and one of its most elusive figures had just met a silent, clinical end. Within hours, rumors began to circulate. Was it a natural death, a poisoning, or a precision strike disguised as one? The Italian police remained silent, but forensic experts whispered about untraceable toxins and expertly falsified documents. Across the Mediterranean in Tel Aviv, Mossad analysts monitored breaking news from Rome with measured calm. For them, this was not unexpected. Months of surveillance, intercepted messages, and shadow meetings had led to this precise moment, executed on European soil. For Hamas, the loss was devastating. The man on that train had been a strategist, a financier, and a bridge between militant wings across continents. His operations stretched from Damascus to Istanbul, weaving networks of money, weapons, and coded loyalty. The stakes extended beyond one man. His death signaled a message written in silence. No safe haven existed for those marked by Mossad. Every station, airport, or quiet cafe could be the stage of a covert execution, meticulously planned months in advance. In diplomatic circles, the incident threatened to ignite tensions. If Israel was behind it, Rome had become an unwilling host to foreign assassination. If not, another player had entered the deadly game, armed with the same precision and intent. Behind closed doors, security agencies scrambled to reconstruct timelines, passport data, and surveillance footage. But the operatives who had executed the mission had already vanished, erased like vapor, leaving only the echo of a perfectly completed operation. Who planned the death of Mahmoud al-Khaled? Was it a sanctioned act of state vengeance, or a shadow faction operating beyond official oversight? And how had they penetrated the layers of European security without leaving a trace? What message was intended by choosing a train, a symbol of motion, of civilization, of daily life, to stage a killing? Was it coincidence, or an intentional reminder that even in movement, a target can never truly escape? How had Mossad tracked him across borders, across false identities and encrypted channels? And how many others like him were being followed at that very moment, unaware that their every movement was catalogued in invisible digital archives? The questions grew darker with every revelation. Did the operatives return home celebrated, or did they fade into bureaucratic shadows, forgotten by the very state that sent them? And what kind of machinery could make death seem like an accident? In the end, one truth remained certain. Mahmoud al-Khaled's death was not random. It was deliberate, planned, and executed with surgical precision. A signature invisible to the public eye, but familiar to those who live and die in the trade of secrets. Mahmoud al-Khaled was born in 1967 in the narrow alleys of Gaza City, in a neighborhood where the smell of sea salt mixed with gunpowder and dust. His father was a schoolteacher, his mother a nurse at a small UN-run clinic. From a young age, he saw tanks rolling past his home and soldiers shouting orders in languages he did not yet understand. Every explosion etched itself into his developing mind, like a vow he did not yet know he had made. His family struggled to survive amid curfews, food shortages, and raids. Mahmoud grew up watching his older brothers arrested, his cousins disappear across checkpoints, his mother's quiet resilience harden into silence. He learned quickly that survival depended on observation, listening more than speaking, studying faces, remembering every name. Those instincts would later serve him well. At school, teachers noted his discipline and eerie calm. He excelled in mathematics and languages, mastering Hebrew by secretly listening to radio frequencies and copying down military broadcasts. By adolescence, he was already acting as a courier for local resistance groups, carrying messages folded beneath the lining of his shoes. Every step was a small rebellion. In his teenage years, Gaza became his battlefield of understanding. The first Intifada ignited, and Mahmoud found himself standing on rooftops watching young men throw stones at armored jeeps. The symbolism was not lost on him. Power was not about strength, but precision. It was the first lesson that shaped his future as both tactician and fugitive. Mahmoud was not driven by blind hatred. His ideology was methodical, built on the belief that control and calculation could outmatch chaos. He viewed conflict as a science of timing, a matter of leverage, not emotion. Friends described him as meticulous, never impulsive, never loud. His temper was cold, his patience unnerving. He kept a pocket notebook filled with coded phrases, diagrams, and numbers. He recorded every encounter, every contact, every potential leak. He had an obsession with symmetry, preferring even numbers for meetings, even-numbered hotel rooms, and even digits in phone codes. To him, structure was safety. Disorder was death. He rarely smiled, but when he did, it was deliberate. A calculated gesture used to calm, deceive, or command. He avoided alcohol and crowds, often choosing solitude. He once said to a confidant, "A man who talks too much becomes a map others can read. A man who listens becomes a shadow." That shadow became his identity. Within Hamas circles, he was known as Abu Tariq, but among intelligence agencies he carried multiple aliases. In Israeli dossiers, he was codenamed the Engineer's Hand, a nod to his logistical genius and his connection to the late bomb maker Yahya Ayyash. To his followers, he was al-Muhandis al-Samit, the silent engineer. He cultivated this image carefully. He liked the myth of invisibility. When younger operatives spoke of martyrdom, he spoke of endurance. "A martyr dies once," he told them. "A strategist dies every day and still continues." This quiet vanity, his belief that he could outlive and outthink every opponent, would later lead him onto that fateful train to Rome. His transition from ideologue to operative began after the Oslo Accords. Mahmoud saw the agreements as betrayal disguised as diplomacy. He was among the first to call for renewed armed resistance, arguing that negotiation without leverage was surrender. He moved through underground networks, building logistical routes between Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. In the early 2000s, he became the architect of several financial fronts, channeling millions through charities and shell companies. Western intelligence began to notice patterns, linking accounts in Istanbul and Amman to a man with multiple passports and one face blurred across continents. Politically, he understood optics. He cultivated the image of a scholar, attending conferences, giving measured interviews, quoting poetry and Quranic verses. But behind that facade, he was coordinating shipments of weapons hidden in relief convoys, using humanitarian routes as camouflage for war. By 2008, Mahmoud had risen quietly through the Hamas hierarchy, becoming a liaison between political and military wings. He wore suits instead of fatigues, but his decisions armed fighters and reshaped operations. His calm voice on encrypted lines could determine whether a convoy crossed or burned. The lines between diplomacy and warfare had blurred, and he was the man balancing them. Mahmoud al-Khaled's first recorded arrest occurred in 1988, during the height of the First Intifada. He was 19, carrying coded letters and a list of safe houses between Khan Yunis and Rafah. Israeli soldiers intercepted him at a checkpoint after an informant betrayed his route. He was detained without trial for 7 months under administrative detention, a period that would define his distrust of every human voice thereafter. Interrogators described him as unbreakable. He spoke little, never raised his eyes, and repeated the same sentence in Arabic and Hebrew. "You already know what you want to hear." The Israelis learned that silence was his greatest weapon. Upon release, his reputation among the resistance solidified. He was no longer a courier. He was a symbol of discipline. During the following decade, Mahmoud orchestrated small-scale sabotage missions across Gaza's southern border. He avoided large confrontations, preferring precision. When others sought chaos, he sought control. His operations involved explosives hidden in water pipes, radio beacons disguised as children's toys, and timed blackouts used to mask smuggling convoys. He was always one step ahead, methodically teaching others that invisibility was power. By the late 1990s, he had become both asset and liability. Egyptian intelligence monitored his movements. Jordan banned his entry. Yet within Hamas, his legend grew. A man who seemed to vanish before every arrest order, reappearing weeks later with new documents and new scars. In 1999, Mahmoud was captured during a raid near Rafah, held in an underground facility for nearly a year. Officially, he was never registered as a prisoner. Unofficially, he was interrogated for 32 days without record. Former detainees later recalled his return, thinner, quieter, slower to speak. He never spoke publicly about what happened in that cell. But afterward, he adopted new methods. He avoided phone calls, trusted no couriers, and began training recruits to operate as isolated cells with minimal contact. Pain had taught him efficiency. His ideology hardened, transforming belief into discipline, and discipline into obsession. After his release, Mahmoud relocated briefly to Damascus, where exiled Hamas figures were reorganizing after internal divisions. There, he formed a covert logistics cell known informally as al-Maslak, the Path. Its purpose was simple: to build a decentralized financial and transport network for weapons, funds, and intelligence. He recruited engineers, bankers, and smugglers, binding them through loyalty and encrypted communication. Every member knew only one contact above them, ensuring compartmentalization. By 2002, the network extended across Cyprus, Lebanon, and the Sinai Peninsula. European security services began detecting unusual cargo movements, containers rerouted through multiple ports, charitable organizations funneling cash through discreet banks in Zurich and Vienna. Mahmoud was behind it all. He used his fluency in multiple languages to navigate the international scene. To diplomats, he appeared as a humanitarian coordinator. To militants, he was the invisible hand moving the chessboard. Israeli and American agencies began labeling him a facilitator, a term that understated his influence but hinted at his danger. Inside Hamas, rival factions grew wary. Some viewed him as a bureaucrat in exile, others as a silent kingmaker. Yet none could match his access. Mahmoud had achieved something rare in that world. He was indispensable, and that made him untouchable. Between 2005 and 2008, Mahmoud shifted his focus toward field operations. Intelligence reports linked him to coordinated smuggling networks, transporting advanced weaponry from Libya and Sudan through Sinai tunnels. He designed routes that evaded Israeli drones by exploiting terrain and timing. His engineering mind treated geography as geometry. In 2006, he allegedly financed and supervised the kidnapping of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. Though he never appeared in official communications, intercepted emails and coded ledgers later revealed his digital fingerprints, transactions matching the operation's logistics. For Mossad, that was confirmation. Mahmoud was not only funding terror, he was directing it. His operations became increasingly surgical. A convoy disappeared near Rafah under mysterious circumstances. A collaborator in Cairo was found dead, poisoned with cyanide hidden in a pen. Mahmoud's methods were cold and efficient. He considered fear a tool, not a byproduct. He once told a confidant, "If you leave a body behind, it should speak louder than 1,000 speeches." These acts drew attention. Western agencies began adding his aliases to watch lists. Passports under the names Fadi Nasser and Hani Suleiman appeared in multiple flight logs. Still, he slipped through borders, changing his walk, his accent, even the rhythm of his breathing. Survival had become an art form. On March 11, 2007, a warehouse explosion in Port Sudan destroyed a shipment of arms intended for Gaza. Local authorities called it an accident, but classified reports linked the incident to a Mossad interception, guided by information leaked from within Mahmoud's own network. From that day, he began purging his ranks. In 2008, A secret meeting in Istanbul brought him face-to-face with Iranian intermediaries seeking coordination. Turkish intelligence observed, but could not act. That same year, a financier close to Mahmoud vanished after boarding a flight from Beirut to Algiers. The plane landed. The man did not. In 2009, Mahmoud personally oversaw the movement of surface-to-air missile components through Egypt's Sinai. Satellite footage later confirmed the convoy's path matched Mossad's surveillance data. Yet he was never touched, never caught. He had learned to anticipate interception like a mathematician predicting probability. By early 2010, intelligence chatter indicated Mahmoud had planned a large-scale operation targeting Israeli diplomatic interests in Europe. He traveled frequently, Damascus, Milan, Athens, under his alias. Mossad's European desk labeled him Priority Red. Preparations began for containment. On October 10th, he purchased a one-way train ticket from Milan to Rome. What he did not know was that his name had already entered the final stage of an Israeli file marked Nesher, meaning eagle. 5 days later, that file would be closed forever. By 2010, Mahmoud al-Khaled's name circulated through every Western and Middle Eastern intelligence network. He had become both legend and liability, a man whose fingerprints traced through conflicts spanning 3 continents. To the Israeli security agency, he was no longer a financier or strategist. He was a ghost directing networks that killed civilians and soldiers alike. His influence reached into black markets, refugee camps, and European banks. Each operation traced back in some invisible thread to him. CIA and MI6 analysts began cataloging his travel patterns, identifying at least 27 false identities used over 8 years. His passports, Syrian, Sudanese, Jordanian, bore stamps from places no ordinary traveler would risk. He moved between safe houses in Athens, Vienna, and Budapest, leaving minimal digital footprints. Interpol marked him as a transnational operative, though few knew his real face. By mid-year, Mossad's internal directorate placed him on the Tebet list, a classified ledger of individuals deemed legitimate targets for neutralization abroad. The decision was not made lightly. Weeks of debate between political and security leaders determined that eliminating him would cripple the funding arteries sustaining Hamas's European operations. His death, they argued, would be both message and necessity. The order came quietly, delivered through an encrypted transmission known only by its code phrase, Operation Cedar Mirror. It authorized Mossad's European desk to initiate surveillance, establish cover teams, and prepare an execution plan disguised as natural death. Mahmoud's every step from that moment became a countdown measured in silence. The first attempt came in Athens, disguised as coincidence. Mahmoud's hotel room telephone emitted a brief electrical surge after an incoming call from a secure satellite line. The line had been rerouted through a signal interception device placed beneath the hotel's switchboard. He survived, barely, after experiencing chest pain that local doctors attributed to food poisoning. Mossad operatives withdrew within hours, leaving no trace. Weeks later, a package arrived for him in Istanbul, a diplomatic parcel sent from an address in Beirut. Inside was a single folder containing forged financial statements. As he leafed through the pages, he noticed a faint metallic dust coating his fingertips. Within minutes, he began coughing violently. The hotel staff rushed him to hospital, but again, he lived. Later analysis suggested the use of thallium, a slow-acting toxin favored for silent assassinations. Each failure refined the next strategy. Mossad's technology division designed micro-delivery systems hidden in ventilation ducts, disguised aerosols, and contact poisons triggered by heat and humidity. Yet Mahmoud's paranoia saved him. He changed hotels frequently, avoided routine, and even slept sitting upright in train compartments to prevent surprise attacks. Still, Mossad operatives grew closer. Surveillance footage from Vienna captured him entering a cafe frequented by an undercover asset. The operative's contact lens camera recorded Mahmoud's movements, his coffee order, the slight tremor in his left hand, a signal that his health was failing. For the assassins, that tremor meant time was finally on their side. Every secret war has its moment of inevitability, a point where both hunter and hunted understand the ending has already been written. For Mahmoud, that moment came when his encrypted communications began to fail. Messages vanished mid-transmission. Bank accounts froze. Trusted couriers disappeared. He sensed the pattern but could not halt it. He confided to one associate in Damascus, "If they come for me, it will be quiet. I will not hear it." He boarded his final train to Rome days later, unaware that the seats around him were filled with ordinary passengers, and at least 2 Mossad operatives traveling under forged European passports. By then, he was not only a target, he was a symbol, a problem that could no longer be contained through politics or diplomacy. The machinery of the state had decided his fate. All that remained was execution disguised as coincidence. The story of Mahmoud al-Khaled cannot exist apart from the long and brutal continuum of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. His life unfolded within a war of asymmetry, one side defined by technological superiority, the other by human endurance. Since 1948, layers of displacement, siege, and retribution had shaped every generation in Gaza. By the time Mahmoud was born, the conflict had already become an inheritance passed like bloodline. The First Intifada gave rise to a new generation of militants and ideologues, men who saw diplomacy as illusion and violence as expression. The formation of Hamas in 1987 signaled not merely an uprising, but an ideological crystallization, a belief that resistance was both sacred and perpetual. Mahmoud grew into this climate, molded by street protests, airstrikes, and funerals turned into parades of defiance. Israel's counter-strategy evolved just as relentlessly. Intelligence became its weapon of precision, enabling operations beyond borders and beneath headlines. From Beirut to Dubai, the doctrine remained the same. Remove the hand that pulls the trigger, no matter where it hides. Mahmoud represented that hand, an engineer of operations, a mind connecting scattered movements into a single pulse. By 2010, the conflict had entered a new phase. Battles were no longer fought in open fields but across data servers, bank transfers, and diplomatic corridors. For every missile launched in Gaza, a transaction in Europe funded its flight. The war Mahmoud waged was not of fire but of wires and silence. The international web surrounding Mahmoud's activities stretched far beyond the Middle East. Iran supplied ideological and logistical support, seeing in Hamas a tool of proxy deterrence. Syria, before its civil war, hosted exiled leadership, granting sanctuary in exchange for influence. Lebanon's southern corridors served as training and transit grounds, facilitated by Hezbollah intermediaries. Meanwhile, Egypt played a double game. Its intelligence agencies monitored Hamas to contain instability, yet local smugglers and sympathetic clerics funneled weapons through Sinai. Jordan rejected Hamas operatives publicly, but tolerated certain financial channels through Amman's banks. Mahmoud exploited every contradiction, turning regional politics into opportunity. In Europe, nations adopted cautious neutrality. Italy, France, and Germany officially condemned all terrorism, yet their financial institutions became silent enablers through gaps in oversight. The same banking secrecy that protected corporate wealth also shielded militant funding. Western intelligence, wary of political backlash, often looked away until evidence became undeniable. Israel viewed this network as a direct existential threat. To its leaders, the war was not territorial, it was temporal. Every year that operatives like Mahmoud remained alive allowed Hamas to evolve, adapt, and regenerate. Mossad's mandate thus extended beyond defense. It became preemption. Each assassination abroad was justified as a necessary excision from a spreading malignancy. Against this geopolitical chessboard, Mahmoud's movements were not random. They were calculations within a much larger equation, one balancing ideology, pragmatism, and survival. To some governments, he was a negotiator. To others, a terrorist. In truth, he was a mirror reflecting the global contradictions of the war itself. Mahmoud al-Khaled mattered because he embodied a new archetype of warfare, the hybrid operative who blurred the lines between militant and bureaucrat. Unlike traditional commanders, he operated through finance and strategy rather than bullets. His reach was intellectual. He designed frameworks that others could execute. That made him both invisible and irreplaceable. For Hamas, he was the architect of sustainability. He created the logistical veins that allowed weapons, funds, and technology to circulate under the radar of sanctions and surveillance. Without him, operations slowed. With him, they multiplied quietly, spreading across continents like coded whispers. His genius was decentralization, creating networks so resilient that even his death could not immediately dismantle them. For Mossad, Mahmoud represented the evolution of the enemy. Gone were the days of open insurgents and visible cells. Men like him turned ideology into data, resistance into spreadsheets. He transformed the battlefield from deserts and streets into airports, embassies, and encrypted emails. Neutralizing him was not only about stopping attacks, it was about halting the intellectual momentum behind them. In the broader theater of geopolitics, Mahmoud symbolized the endurance of a cause that refused extinction. His death would not end the conflict, but it would signal Israel's reach, a reminder that no border, no passport, and no disguise could guarantee safety. That symbolism mattered as much as any military victory. By the time his heart stopped on the Rome-bound train, Mahmoud had already transcended mortality in the world of espionage. He had become a variable in an endless equation of vengeance and survival, a name spoken in encrypted channels, erased in public reports, and whispered in the brief silence before the next operation began. On October 9, 2010, 3 individuals arrived separately at Milan Malpensa Airport. Their names on paper were Martin Weiss, Clara Roth, and Daniel Levy, identities stitched together from fragments of real lives, each supported by meticulously forged passports. They moved like tourists, one with a camera, another with a guidebook, the third with a folded map. None appeared to know one another. All 3 were members of Mossad's takedown unit, specialists in covert eliminations. Their arrival times were staggered by hours, avoiding pattern recognition software. Each carried lightweight luggage concealing encrypted communication devices embedded in power banks. Their base of operations was an apartment rented under a deceased Italian businessman's name, one of many ghost properties maintained by Israeli intelligence across Europe. The mission briefing had been clear: track the target's movement from northern Italy to Rome, confirm identity, neutralize without trace, and ensure plausible medical cause. The cover story for the operation was a pharmaceutical conference, allowing movement through hotels and transport hubs without scrutiny. Mahmoud al-Khaled had been under surveillance since his arrival in Milan 3 days earlier. Satellite imagery confirmed his hotel location near Piazza Duca d'Aosta. A field operative disguised as a maintenance worker placed a sensor behind his hotel room door frame, monitoring movement, temperature, and sound. When he booked his train to Rome, the clock began ticking. The team divided tasks precisely. Weiss shadowed Mahmoud's financial activity, tracking his credit card use and ATM withdrawals. Roth, posing as a journalist, established herself in the same hotel under the guise of covering an art exhibition. Levy oversaw logistics, vehicles, communication relay, and escape routes. Cameras hidden in Roth's hotel room clock and phone charger streamed encrypted footage to the operations center in Tel Aviv. Every motion was logged. Mahmoud's habits followed predictable order: morning tea, late breakfast, short phone calls in Arabic, long silences staring from the balcony toward the street below. He met no one directly. He trusted only movement. Mossad's psychological assessment concluded that Mahmoud felt the net closing. He had changed aliases, avoided digital contact, and scheduled his travel through physical ticket counters instead of online bookings. But the operatives were already inside his pattern. They knew his seat number before he did. Weiss followed him to Milano Centrale the morning of October 15th, maintaining distance. Roth boarded the same train 15 minutes later. Levy, disguised as a courier, rode ahead in the next carriage. The coordination was surgical, the communication silent. Small nods, fleeting glances, synchronized breathing, each signal rehearsed through years of training. The Intercity 582 departed Milan at precisely 09:10 a.m. Mahmoud took his assigned window seat in carriage 4. He placed his briefcase on his lap, adjusting his glasses before opening a small paperback, The Prince by Machiavelli. Observers later noted the irony. 2 rows behind him sat Roth, dressed casually, scrolling through her phone. She had already placed a modified aerosol device beneath her seat, its timer synchronized with the train's scheduled stop in Florence. The device released microdoses of dimethylmercury into the air, a toxin so potent that 1 drop could be lethal. Yet the dosage here was carefully measured. It was designed to simulate natural cardiac arrest hours later, leaving minimal trace. Weiss moved through the aisle intermittently, posing as a photographer capturing scenic landscapes. Each pass allowed him to confirm Mahmoud's condition and the visibility of the target zone. At 10:45 a.m., Mahmoud visited the cafe car. Surveillance footage later showed him sipping espresso alone, calm, unaware that his final hours were already in motion. At 11:10 a.m., he returned to his seat. Roth discreetly adjusted the airflow vent, redirecting the toxin circulation. Mahmoud began coughing lightly, but dismissed it. He reached for water, then his notebook, scribbling short numbers in Arabic, a possible code later found incomplete. By the time the train approached Rome, his complexion had paled. Witnesses reported him moving toward the lavatory, staggering slightly. Inside, his breathing slowed, his pulse weakened. The toxin had done its work. When the conductor knocked half an hour later, Mahmoud was unresponsive, his eyes fixed on nothing, his body cooling under fluorescent light. Meanwhile, Roth disembarked at Florence. Weiss and Levy exited separately at Rome Termini, blending into the morning crowd. The operation's entire visible phase had lasted less than 3 hours. The tools of the operation reflected Mossad's reputation for precision and minimalism. The aerosol device, built in a Tel Aviv laboratory, was disguised as a common travel deodorant canister. Its internal timer was set to release vapor through a chemical membrane activated by vibration, perfect for the motion of a train. The poison, dimethylmercury, was chosen for its delayed onset and difficulty of detection. Forensics would later interpret symptoms as heart failure due to stress or pre-existing condition. Every contingency had been considered: temperature variance, airflow, even cleaning schedules of the train compartments. Communication between agents occurred through coded Bluetooth pulses emitted from modified earbuds. Each message lasted less than a second, encoded in frequency shifts imperceptible to the human ear. A single pulse signified success. 3 pulses indicated abort. None were required that day. To conceal evidence, Weiss discarded the aerosol device in a recycling bin at Florence's station, where it would later be melted with industrial waste. The microtransmitter used to track Mahmoud's movement was programmed to self-fry upon signal loss, erasing all traceable data. By the time Italian investigators began collecting fingerprints, Mossad's presence had already evaporated from the continent. During the operation, there were moments of near exposure. A customs officer in Milan had briefly questioned Roth's luggage, pausing on the deodorant canister. Weiss intervened casually, posing as a fellow passenger offering to help translate. The officer smiled, stamped the document, and moved on. Later on the train, a child seated near Mahmoud accidentally dropped a toy under his seat, nearly striking the hidden device. Roth retrieved it with a calm smile, masking the silent terror pulsing beneath her ribs. Every second on that journey carried the weight of potential disaster. Had Mahmoud looked up for a moment longer, had the airflow shifted slightly, had the train delayed by minutes, the plan might have failed. But fate, or calculation, carried it forward flawlessly. Mossad operatives live by a single creed: perfection leaves no witnesses. When the conductor finally opened the lavatory door, the scene appeared ordinary. Mahmoud slumped against the sink, his briefcase beside him, eyes wide but unfocused. The faint almond scent in the air blended with detergent. No wound, no weapon, only stillness. Emergency responders declared him dead at 13:42 p.m., citing possible heart failure. His passport listed him as Mahmoud al-Khaled, businessman, age 43. The report would later note no signs of foul play. Italian police sealed the carriage for examination, unaware that the true cause of death had already dissipated into the air vents. Roth arrived at Rome's Fiumicino airport by evening. Weiss flew out of Zurich the next morning. Levy departed from Paris under an alternate identity 2 days later. Within 48 hours, Operation Cedar Mirror was officially archived under accomplished without trace. Mahmoud's death was ruled natural, yet those who understood the language of covert warfare recognized its signature. It was not a coincidence. It was a message, one written in silence, executed in motion, and erased with professional grace. When the train reached Rome's Termini station at 13:55 p.m., the passengers disembarked unaware that one of them had died only minutes before arrival. A cleaner discovered the locked lavatory, knocking repeatedly before summoning the conductor. Inside, Mahmoud al-Khaled's body was found seated upright, eyes half open, one hand gripping the edge of the sink. His briefcase rested neatly beside him. The air carried a faint metallic bitterness, unnoticed by those who entered. Italian authorities treated it as a medical emergency. Paramedics attempted resuscitation, but rigor mortis had already begun. Within 30 minutes, police cordoned off the carriage. The passport and credit cards appeared authentic, though the accent noted by passengers did not match the nationality printed in his documents. The case was logged simply as male, unidentified cause of death, pending toxicology. By evening, the media reported the story as a mysterious death of a Middle Eastern businessman on a Rome-bound train. No one suspected espionage, not yet. At the Sapienza University morgue, the autopsy revealed no signs of external trauma. The heart displayed abnormal fibrillation, and the lungs showed mild discoloration consistent with chemical inhalation. Toxicologists detected traces of mercury compounds in the bloodstream, but could not determine their form or origin. The preliminary report concluded cardiac arrest induced by stress or exposure to an unknown contaminant. A pathologist privately noted the peculiar symmetry of the internal damage, cellular degradation without visible poisoning. "Too clean," he said to a colleague, "almost as if someone wanted it to look natural." The phrase never made it into the official record. Authorities contacted several embassies for identity verification. None claimed the body. The hotel in Milan confirmed his check-in under the same alias but reported no next of kin. The case began to drift toward bureaucratic oblivion, until an Interpol analyst in Brussels recognized the fingerprints. Within hours, the name Mahmoud al-Khaled resurfaced in encrypted diplomatic traffic. When Italian intelligence reviewed surveillance footage from Milan and Rome stations, anomalies emerged. Mahmoud appeared in multiple angles, but so did 3 other figures. Their faces were partially obscured, their movements synchronized with his. One woman boarded after him, one man before, and another disappeared moments before the body was discovered. Interpol cross-referenced their images with global databases. Each passport used for their travel traced to citizens from countries across Europe, Germany, Switzerland, France. Yet within days, those real individuals reported their passports stolen months earlier. The scandal echoed the 2010 Dubai incident, when Mossad operatives used similar forgeries during the assassination of Hamas commander Mahmoud al-Mabhouh. Diplomatic tension rose immediately. Italy demanded explanations from Israel, but official channels returned silence. The Israeli Foreign Ministry issued a brief statement expressing no knowledge of the event. Behind closed doors, intelligence alliances strained under the weight of plausible deniability. European security services privately admitted admiration for the precision of the operation, even as they condemned it publicly. Media outlets seized upon the narrative, a phantom death on a moving train, executed by invisible hands. Speculation filled headlines. Who could strike with such precision and vanish across borders within hours? The world, knowingly or not, already had the answer. The revelation that a high-ranking Hamas commander had been killed in Italy sent ripples across diplomatic and intelligence communities. Hamas declared Mahmoud a martyr, accusing Israel of violating international law. In Gaza, thousands attended a symbolic funeral, waving flags and chanting vows of vengeance. In Tel Aviv, officials neither confirmed nor denied involvement, maintaining strategic ambiguity. The Italian government faced domestic outrage over the breach of sovereignty. Opposition leaders demanded investigation into foreign espionage operations on national soil. Behind the scenes, NATO intelligence channels reassessed Israeli activity within Europe, quietly tightening surveillance on known operatives. In Washington, the CIA circulated an internal memorandum summarizing Operation Cedar Mirror, classifying it as probable Israeli action. Analysts concluded that the precision mirrored previous Mossad methodologies: multiple aliases, simultaneous entry points, rapid withdrawal. The memo ended with a single line: "Success leaves silence. For weeks, newspapers debated the ethics of assassination as foreign policy. Commentators compared the killing to the Cold War tactics once reserved for Soviet defectors. Yet public memory faded quickly, consumed by newer crises. Mahmoud's death, like many before it, dissolved into the gray fog of geopolitical necessity. Only those in the shadows remembered its perfection. Beneath every covert operation lies an empire of desks, cables, and silence. The Mossad bureaucracy, the unseen citadel, functions not through noise, but through paperwork, encrypted directives, and invisible consensus. It is a machine without vanity, existing solely to refine the art of elimination. Within its walls, operations are not called assassinations, but resolutions. Each file carries both a target's name and the justification for their removal, written in language designed to sound administrative rather than mortal. Analysts, lawyers, and political liaisons convene in dim conference rooms, speaking in abbreviations and numbers. Every mission passes through layers of authorization, each stamped with the same cold precision as a factory blueprint. Bureaucracy becomes ritual, a way to give moral architecture to necessary evil. The machinery runs on anonymity. Operatives are codenamed, supervisors faceless. Those who work within it rarely question purpose. They believe in balance, not morality. Their work ensures that chaos never gains momentum. In these fluorescent-lit offices, power is exercised through signatures rather than weapons. The hand that signs a death order never sees the face that dies. And in that distance lies the true perfection of statecraft, the ability to kill without ever touching blood. They are the unseen soldiers, Mossad's takedown unit, elite, detached, mythic. To them, names mean little. Each is an archetype: the watcher, the handler, the technician, the ghost. They live in apartments under assumed identities, their neighbors unaware that behind thin walls sit people trained to end lives precisely and quietly. Their weapons are not guns but routine. They blend into airports, cafes, and train stations. Every gesture rehearsed, every look calculated. They speak many languages, hold many passports, but belong nowhere. In their world, failure is a word unspoken, and survival is measured by disappearance. They leave no medals, no graves, no flags. Their victories are marked by silence, and when one of them vanishes, retired, reassigned, erased, no one asks why. The invisible legions exist only as whispers in corridors where nations trade deniability for dominance. Rome was not the first stage, nor would it be the last. In 1973, agents hunted Black September operatives across Europe in Operation Wrath of God. Men shot in doorways, poisoned in hotel rooms, tracked through fogged train windows. In Lillehammer, a mistake left an innocent man dead, a scar that taught Mossad to evolve, never again to leave a trace of doubt. In the 1990s, a car bomb in Beirut obliterated a Hezbollah commander. In 2010 in Dubai, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh was suffocated in a luxury hotel, the assassins disguised as tennis players. Cameras caught them, but identities melted like smoke. Each mission, refined precision. Mahmoud al-Khaled's death was an echo of these ghosts, an operation born from decades of learned invisibility. Every method, every misdirection, was inheritance. The lineage of assassins carried lessons like scripture. Trust no one, repeat nothing, leave only the illusion of natural order. Those who study such histories see patterns that governments deny. The same rhythm repeats: arrival, surveillance, elimination, silence. It is espionage as art form, bureaucracy as ritual, death as diplomacy. High above, in the sterile chambers of policy, sit the architects, the leaders who authorize shadows. They speak of security, not sacrifice. To them, each death is a transaction, a balancing of ledgers written in human lives. Their faces appear on television screens, calm, articulate, detached. Yet behind every polished statement lies an unspoken truth. Power demands its own kind of worship. These are the gods behind the curtain, flawed, mortal, yet armed with the authority to erase existence. They never hold weapons, only pens. But their ink, once signed, is more final than any bullet ever fired. In Gaza, The announcement of Mahmoud al-Khaled's death spread like wildfire through alleys and crowded mosques. There was no body to bury, only a photograph framed in black cloth. Thousands gathered in the central square for a symbolic funeral, chanting his nom de guerre, Abu Tariq. Speakers hailed him as a martyr of precision, a man who fought with intellect rather than gunfire. The sound of mourning mixed with defiance. In Tel Aviv, the event passed without ceremony. Inside intelligence offices, analysts archived the mission file under the tag, Success. For them, emotion held no place. The objective had been achieved, Europe's clandestine networks disrupted. Yet even within Mossad, some felt the weight of the silence that followed. Each victory carried the echo of inevitability. One more name erased, one more file closed, one more war deferred rather than ended. In Rome, Italian officials briefed the press cautiously, calling the death an unfortunate natural incident. Few believed it, but none challenged the illusion. Trains ran on schedule the next morning, and commuters sat where Mahmoud had once died, unaware that history had passed quietly through their carriage. Mahmoud's death altered little on the surface, yet beneath, it rippled through the architecture of global espionage. Hamas reorganized its European channels, decentralizing further, learning from his precision and his downfall. Young operatives studied his methods, calling them the doctrine of silence. His legend became instruction, his failure, warning. Israel strengthened its aura of reach. European nations quietly tightened visa systems, wary of foreign assassins using forged identities. Diplomatic conversations between Tel Aviv and Brussels became colder, more calculated. Each state pretended surprise, yet every intelligence agency understood the unspoken rule. Such acts would continue as long as enemies breathed. In the years following, new figures rose to fill Mahmoud's absence. Each carried fragments of his ideology, none his restraint. The balance he had maintained between strategy and violence dissolved, giving way to younger leaders driven more by vengeance than vision. Thus, the assassination that sought stability instead invited a new generation of chaos. In the end, Mahmoud al-Khaled's death changed little in the grand scheme of geopolitics. The trains still ran, the wars still burned, and governments continued to operate behind curtains of polished denial. But what his death revealed was a world built upon invisible decisions, a realm where justice is measured in secrecy and morality dissolves in classified ink. There, nations kill quietly, and truth survives only as rumor. Mahmoud became another name on a list that never ends. The file was closed, the mission erased. Yet somewhere, deep in the machinery of state power, another name was already being prepared.